Good day. Continuing the FPS timeline, we are entering into the era of the FPS where it suddenly boomed in popularity, which is why I have called it the boom era. Unfortunately, because the FPS is quite vast with many games and an illustrious series, I had no choice but to continue this FPS series, but in many parts rather than the 3 parts I suggested earlier. This will allow me to have enough time to delve deeper into the games and hopefully provide you with better quality content in a more condensed manner. This will also allow me to cover a lot more games, because you know what will happen if I miss someone's favorite FPS. Okay, I'll stop being bitter now. On the last video of the FPS pioneers, we ended with the earliest successful console-ported fully 3D FPS called GoldenEye 007. We witnessed some development in the FPS genre during this time, most notably the graphics, which played an important role for the first-person view as it is a simulation of the player's perspective within an artificial realm. And the higher the level of detail, the more it allows for a realistic feel while playing. You are probably thinking that graphics have been improved for all video game genres in general over the years. It would make sense for any developers to invest in top-notch quality all the time. But clearly, this has always been the case for the FPS and first-person view games as opposed to other genres, where graphic detail has nearly reached the maximum satisfaction level for the consumer. We will continue to see these graphical enhancements in these 4 games that I will cover on this video, and evidently later in the boom era. First on our list is a game published by Sierra Studios and developed by newly created team at the time, Valve. Yes, the same folks who developed widely known Left 4 Dead, Counter-Strike, and of course the popular software distribution platform, Steam. Half-Life, a first-person shooter in a sci-fi universe where you play as a scientist that was in the front line of a science experiment that had gone wrong, causing aliens from another dimension to invade and attack the helpless humans. He is urged to escape the facility and to reach the surface for safety.
Please, get to the surface as soon as you can.
But he encounters many of these aliens along his path, and also secret agents who are sent out to destroy these creatures and any humans who witness this occurrence. As you can already tell, the graphics in comparison to GoldenEye are much improved as they are smooth and less block-like. Not sure if that's a word, but I hope you understand what I mean. The main reason for this is due to a higher polygon count. Another obvious improvement for the FPS picture altogether has to be the speech and dialogue coming from the surrounding people you encounter.
Excuse me, Gordon, but I'm rather busy now.
Such as the scientists and the security guards. The interactions are usually brief, but were unknown to the FPS genre as a whole prior.
Get him to let us out.
This newly added aspect really helped with the focus of the first-person perspective, because you no longer need to read through the script. You have the ability to maintain your attention to the speaker or anything important happening while listening. Now let's move on to the more subtle additions. One very important change is that Half-Life is not played as different levels, which you must complete to progress. There are chapters though, that are shown once you reach a certain checkpoint, and because of this non-linearity, it also allows for smoother transitions and only has a brief loading time once you arrive to the new area on the world. Also to note that you're almost always in first-person control of the protagonist, even during cutscenes. These 2 new slight ingredients add more of a personal and realistic feel, which we noted earlier is the FPS's main goal to achieve. Let's talk about how Half-Life introduced some aspects from the puzzle genre, where moving boxes to jump onto to reach certain entrances or exits is almost prevalent. There are some instances where you must jump onto platforms using the exact level of momentum to not over or under jump and fall to your death. To note, there are 2 types of jumps, a crouching one to allow you to jump into tight openings, and the long jump, which requires the Ait'sZ suit. You also must look out for the terrain hazards such as being electrocuted by electric wires submerged in water. What is also intricate about these hazards is that they also apply to the enemy and can be utilized against them. Half-Life also introduced an allied NPC that will follow to a certain extent and will help you either by fighting hostiles, which the security guards are only capable of doing, or they can help you with opening new areas, which both the scientists and the security guards can do. And a small but highly important and influential innovation that Half-Life introduced was the remapping of the keyboard and mouse. The WSAD keys were defaulted as the movement keys and did not need to be reconfigured. This is revolutionary to a genre where now you are able to comfortably use both the mouse and keyboard, the left hand working the keyboard while the right was used to attack, aim, and free look via the mouse. One aspect that stood out greatly were the many fan-based mods. Quite a few of them have become actual games, most notably Counter-Strike, which has had a lot of success and we will likely touch more on later in this timeline. As of 2008, Half-Life has sold around 9.3 million copies and it is easily on the list of top-selling games of all time. Its critical reception is near perfection and it gets undermined when playing the game in present time. And when you take that moment to realize that Half-Life was released in 1998, you really appreciate the work Valve put out as an underdog developer at the time. The user interface was simple but effective and took up very minimal screen space to allow you to fully enjoy the view. An actual tutorial was present to show how to effectively play the game and overcome the many puzzles.
Hello and welcome to the Black Mesa Hazard course.
There is a lot of content present in this FPS that will keep you glued to your chair and focused, all while enjoying the lively cutscenes with full speech. Half-Life had an amazing single player, but really lacked on the multiplayer, which is almost mandatory to be included and done well with an FPS. Our next game has had success inversely to that of Half-Life's, where the multiplayer is the exclamation point and the single player is simplified. Quake 3 Arena, released in 1999, was published by a well-known publisher for the FPS and games in general, Activision. The development of Quake 3 was left in the hands of id once again, to hopefully gain the same success as their previously developed games in the Quake series. So when I say the single player is really simplified, I really do mean bare to the bones.
Welcome to Quake 3 Arena.
The story consists of all the greatest combatants from both the previous Quake and Doom series to fight each other to claim the greatest warrior award. Yep, that's it. The single player game has you fight either one or more bot controlled characters in a free-for-all deathmatch. Whoever has the most points in a match earns a spot on the podium of first, second, and third. Points are earned on kills and lost on suicides. There are 7 tiers and it is completed once you win the 4 arenas of that tier. The last arena is usually a 1v1 with a harder opponent, kind of like a boss. Overall gameplay has hardly changed from even the original Quake, but I think the conservation of the gameplay style is what made it still popular and enjoyable. There are similar weapons to pick up such as a shotgun, rocket launcher, and thunderbolt. Each of the weapons need to be used at the proper moments. For example, the fast firing weapons such as a machine gun and plasma rifle are great when the enemies are in close proximity to ensure you lock on a few hits while dodging. The railgun and rocket launcher are more of a long range, as they have a slow rate of fire but can do some intense damage if aimed at the right spot. Be careful aiming the rockets too close, as they can damage and even cause you to die. Of course, the health packs and armor and ammo pickups are scattered throughout the arena, and for survival reasons, it is imperative to head back to the original locations as they do spawn again. The arenas feel like a maze and you can be wandering lonely in circles depending on its size, but when you have enormous battles with 4 or more players, it can become a thrill of chaos. Multiplayer, as mentioned earlier, is the heart and soul of this game, but because it's only composed of a free-for-all deathmatch, it can get a little repetitive. An expansion was released a year later called Quake 3 Team Arena. It expanded the arena deathmatches to include team battles and further engrave its stamp on multiplayer play. There's not too much to talk about in terms of innovation, but it keeps the simplicity that Quake fans enjoyed from the first 2 installments. Despite this, it was still a commercial and critical success, and the idea of don't fix something that ain't broke really sticks out in Quake 3 Arena. The beginning of the 2000s really started to put an emphasis on the multiplayer, and we saw that with Quake 3 where the single player is almost non-existent. But as this may be true, there was one game that I want to touch on that really broke the mold of how an SPS should be played. DASÜ, released in 2000, was published by Eidos Interactive, based off of London, and was notable for publishing games earlier in the 90s, such as Championship Manager and Tomb Raider. Development of DASÜ was by Ion Storm, founded in 1999 by John Romero and Tom Hall, former developers of familiar id Software. Though they played little in the game's development, which was left in the hands of the lead, Warren Spector. DASÜ contains many distinguishing features and new additions we have not seen in an FPS earlier on this timeline. I will quickly summarize the story as best as I can. It takes place in an alternate cyberpunk universe in 2052. JC Denton is the nanotech augmented human protagonist that you play as, who works as an agent for UNATCO to stop the terrorist organization NSF from stealing vaccines called Ambrosia. This vaccine is important in a time where the Grey Death virus has spread and can be fatal if not treated. But in this game you learn that things are not always what they seem. You encounter many different conspiracy theories such as the Illuminati.
We are the invisible hand. We are the Illuminati.
And you soon learn that a different path must be taken. Although the story changes vastly, the gameplay is still linear and not open world, which really would have been mind-blowingly awesome if it was. There are optional side missions that you can partake when talking with the local populace and help to further develop your skill tree. Yes, this game has a major RPG element. As a superhuman, you are able to obtain skill points for completed missions, exploration, and other methods. Some of the skills are to develop combat with specialized weapons such as heavy, explosives, and low-tech weapons. Other non-combat skills that are available to develop are lockpicking, swimming, increasing medkit's healing efficiency, and many more. Another video game genre element it has incorporated are from stealth games. In order to complete your missions, there are an abundant amount of enemies patrolling the area. And of course, the usual FPS method would be to kill them all, which is an option, but not the most efficient. Using stealth by crouch walking, hiding in the shadows, and using silenced weapons, you can kill or dodge enemies by taking little to no damage. Going this route uses a lot of time and patience, as the enemies are reactive and vigilant to the noises. And if you are caught, the terrorists will signal an alarm to call up the rest of the patrol guards. At that point, you are outnumbered and have a slim chance of taking them all on before hopelessly dying. DASÜ does provide even further methods to complete missions than these two, depending on your skill level. Lockpicking and computer hacking are other methods. Also through dialogue by persuading the enemy. To note, as we mentioned, that though this game is not open world, it does have different story outcomes, depending on the method used to take down your opponents. Brute force will result in a different outcome from that of non-violent methods. This is great for game replayability, so you may enjoy the many different endings of an already large world. Having a game where it uses gameplay aspects from more than one genre is uncommon, and anything more than two genres begins to become rare. While with DASÜ there are four, the three we already reviewed being FPS, RPG, and stealth. And the final one that is present and makes me enjoy this FPS more comes from the adventure genre. The interactions with your teammates,
just fire the arrogant son of a bitch,
the locals, and essentially what are now called NPCs, like that we find in the Elder Scrolls games,
Guess the cops got what they wanted.
keeps you occupied with all the optional secondary missions.
The code is 9183.
They also can provide you with hints on your missions,
Stay out of the ton, bro. Bad shit going down.
or simply provide you further background to the immensely large main story. Identical to Half-Life, DASÜ has a full dialogue on cutscenes and interactions with the NPCs. The voice acting in my opinion is outstanding, and it really gives you the cinematic feel while playing.
You will have to join us for drinks at the Lucky Money later tonight.
Despite all these elements coming from different genres, the FPS is still present and emphasized the most. The different array of weapons and items to find and collect, the first-person interface showing different status indicators such as health, ammo, and the newly introduced customizable inventory using the 0 to 9 number keys are all indications that this game is primarily an FPS. Honestly, there's a lot more I can easily cover, but we will mostly stick with the basics for time's sake. This has been another game on this timeline, Half-Life being the first, where I have been mesmerized when comparing other games released during the same time. My one small complaint has to be the lighting or lack of. The game was just too dark, and at times you can hardly see where you're heading to. Yes, there was an internal flashlight that can be switched on and off, with a not so generous battery capacity, and it was really hard to recharge. So maybe the point was to use the flashlight efficiently? You tell me by commenting. Overall an amazing game, and I highly recommend giving it a try, especially if you're into RPGs. And clearly I'm not the only one that has come to this conclusion. DASÜ has sold over 1 million copies as of 2009. It has been nominated for numerous awards in 2001 and has won a few, most notably 2001 Action Adventure Game of the Year from the 4th Annual Interactive Achievement Awards. Although DASÜ was a success all around, it is not exactly a blueprint that other FPS developers wanted to replicate at this time. Mostly for the obvious reasons of its fusion of many video game genre aspects was too radical. A lot of FPS fans were not in favor of the extreme change from the FPS simplicity. Speaking on simplicity, our next game takes us back to the linear level FPS with some minor improvements from what we saw earlier on this timeline. In 1999, Medal of Honor was released. It was published by big name EA and developed by DreamWorks Interactive, who have developed some not so memorable games. Eventually DreamWorks Interactive would cease to exist and become part of EA. This was the fate we have seen for most of the smaller developing teams. If you can't beat them, join them, or risk filing for bankruptcy because it's almost impossible to compete with major companies who own an endless amount of wealth. This is the sad reality, but it has and it still exists. I'm done ranting now. Let's get back on track. Medal of Honor is one of the earliest known FPS that takes place during World War II, with realistic events. Wolfenstein 3D did happen to occur in World War II, but it was more of a sci-fi. It's noticeable when you fight the zombie Nazis and the bosses who are riding mechs. Medal of Honor was only released for the PS1, and it was never ported for any other console or the PC. There are a few FPS features we can go over that spark our attention when comparing earlier FPS. First to note is the increased intelligence of the enemy AI. They are well aware when a grenade is launched at them, and they will pick up that same grenade to toss it back towards you. The enemies are also aware of their surroundings by taking cover and crouching against your attacks when needed. Another topic we should mention are the unique and different missions you are set out on, including disguising as a Nazi officer, and it is imperative to keep your real identity hidden as best as possible, kinda like blending in with the crowd. When it does come time to kill an enemy for a pass, for example, it must be accomplished covertly and quietly to avoid alerting the guards. Same idea as GoldenEye and Deus Ex we saw earlier in the timeline, where the stealth genre aspect has been borrowed for FPS gameplay. Interesting to note that this game uses the PS1's dual analog controller. What this means is now we can use one of the analogs to move while the other is used to control the free look at the same time. This is a big step up for the FPS played using a controller, as it was an inconvenience in GoldenEye because the free look aim was only present while idle. Speaking on GoldenEye, this game seems to have taken some inspiration from it. We can see with the many mission objectives that must be achieved. Other than these few aspects, the game generally follows the standard FPS rubric and rarely deviates from it. But don't take that as a knock on the game, as it was both a critical and financial success for what was originally expected coming from the creators themselves. It has drawn quite the crowd, and this is just the beginning of a well-admired series that has inspired future World War II FPS. We will stop here for now on these 4 highly renowned FPS that were brought out during the boom era. I will continue this era, and I presume we'll need at least a few more videos. I know it's weird as the Pioneers only had one part, and the boom era seems to have multiple. But it only makes sense, as with classic games being much more primitive, it was easier to cover multiple games in one video. Also, the boom era has many illustrious games, and it's the climax of the FPS popularity. So let me know what you think of this first part of the boom era. Do you prefer to play the FPS using a keyboard and a mouse, or a controller? What are some of the aspects that you must see in an FPS in order to enjoy it fully? As always, I appreciate the support when you CLS. Thank you, and until next time.